right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Music and Technology. This week we're going to be talking about producing your digital music. We're going to be talking about tracks, files, and editing. This is part 1. Next week you'll get part 2. All right, so from last time, remember, when you're setting up your new DAW, your digital audio workstation, when you're creating a new project, you want to do these things. You want to name your file well. You want to have a folder on your computer where you can store all your projects. You want to be able to set your digital audio preferences with a sample rate of 48,000 hertz and a bit depth of 24 bit depth recording. Okay, you want to make sure your file type is either a WAV file if you're using a PC, or an AIF, not AAF, but an AIFF file on Macintosh computers. You want to make sure that your hardware settings are all set up so that you are recording using your audio interface and through your audio interface, and you want to make sure that your buffer size is set to 128 samples. Let's take a look at Logic Pro 10 and how to set up our project. So you're going to open Logic Pro 10 and it's going to give you this option. Now remember, if we look at our project checklist, okay, we got to name our file well. We haven't got there yet, but we're just creating a new file. Have a folder on your computer where you store all your projects. I've got that, a folder called Logic X Projects. Now we're going to take a look. Okay, set up your digital audio preferences. Okay, so we're going to create a new project. But if you take a look, excuse me, in Logic Pro 10, okay, when you create a new project, it gives you this details section. So we're going to click on details. It shows us the tempo, the key signature, time signature. Not too important at the moment, but our devices, this is really important. So if you don't have an audio interface, it'll be the built-in microphone. Now I have the Scarlett Solo audio interface, USB audio interface, where my microphone is connected to, and that is the interface that we're going to use. Okay, and so we want to make sure that our input device is our microphone. Now, because I have built-in monitors, so the speakers that I'm using are actually connected to my audio interface, I'd rather use those than my built-in computer speakers. They're better quality and you'll get better quality sound. So we're going to make sure that our output device, the monitor speakers, are there as well. Now our sample rate. Remember here, our sample rate, we want 48,000 hertz. This will give us the best quality audio when recording. And as you can see here, we have a choice. Okay, 48 kilohertz, 48,000 hertz is what we want. And that is all that we're going to set here. So now it's going to ask us what kind of track we're going to create. You can set your tracks when you are when you set up in Logic. When you first download Logic, you can actually change the preferences even afterwards. But I have it set so that anytime I create a new project, it's going to ask me to what kind of track I want to create first. You may have some software instruments, okay, which might be your MIDI keyboard. You might have some external MIDI keyboard instruments. Now your software instruments are going to be your internal instruments found in Logic, and that can range from a lot of different things, and we'll talk about that later. Your external MIDI tracks are your external MIDI keyboards that you plug into your computer via USB. You may have an actual real guitar or bass that you're going to plug in here. You may have a drum track that you want to create with all these different styles of genres of drums. Or you may want to create an audio track where the microphone is going to be picked up, as well as where any instruments, you can either do a guitar or bass instrument or an audio instrument. Now, because my microphone is plugged into input number 1 on my audio interface, I want to make sure that input 1 is selected. Audio output is always going to be 1 and 2 for our output speakers, because each of our monitor speakers are plugged into outputs number 1 and output number 2 for left and right. We also want to make sure that the device that is selected, okay, is our Scarlett Solo USB port. Our microphone input and the monitor speaker output is selected. Now, if we click on this little arrow, we'll get the preferences screen pop up right away. And that's actually really important. It makes it much easier if we can do it now than creating our track and then going into preferences later. So as we will remember, okay, we want to set our bit depth to 24-bit recording depth and our sample rate to 128 samples. And we want to make sure that our recording file type is AIFF, not AAFF, but AIFF, because I am using a Macintosh computer. I can also select a WAV file on a Mac, but it is better to use AIFF as you get the better quality of sound. So we're in the General tab. Okay. There's not a lot going on in terms of our General tab here, but if we go to the Audio section of our preferences, we can see a lot more. So we can see our input and output devices. We've already selected those, but now we can see our input-output buffer size. And remember, when we are recording, we want 128 sample buffer size. When we are mixing and editing, we can change this to 1024, but we want 128 so that the computer only has those, remember, those two fingers that are dabbling in when recording, and then we can tell the computer, okay, we want to increase the buffer size, the number of fingers that are in the pot working behind the scenes on our editing, and we can change that to 1024 when we're editing. But when we're recording, we want 128. Now, we can go through the different sections to check out and make sure that everything is selected that we want. Okay, so that looks good. Then we're going to go to recording. Now we can see that the audio recording file type, we have a choice, CAF, WAV file, or AIFF. When you're using a Macintosh computer, you want to choose AIFF for the best quality sound. And when you're using a Microsoft computer, obviously not with Logic, but with another DAW, you're going to choose WAV file for a PC or a Macintosh computer. So, or for a PC or a Microsoft computer, excuse me. So we're going to use AIFF, and we have selected our 24-bit recording. So remember, 24-bit recording depth, sample size, 128, 48,000 sample rate. And we want to make sure that we're using a AIFF or a WAV file type. Okay, so we got AIFF, 24-bit recording. Wonderful. We can go through our different settings here as well, but there's nothing else that we need to worry about. Okay, so now that that's all set, our settings are set to what we want. We can exit here. Now we can create our first audio track, which would be from the microphone. Perfect. Now, as you can see, as I talk, it's picking up my voice. It's picking up the feedback, okay, which is really awesome. But what we want to make sure of is a couple of different things. So now we've created our sample, okay, now we've created our project. So we've checked our settings. All the settings and levels are what we want. We have created our one track. Wonderful. Okay, now we want to name our track. This is really important because as you dive into the world of mixing and audio editing, you're going to get a whole number of different tracks. But you want to make sure that you name your track so that you don't get confused as to what track you're working in. So you can either double click, okay, or you can right click and go down to rename track. So we're going to call this track our simple drum beat. Perfect. Okay, now we can also change these symbols. We can either go over here, which is under the information tab, and we can change the icon by going over here under track, or we can actually just simply right click over the icon in the track itself. Now these are our drum tracks, so we're going to just select something interesting here like a drum track. Okay, and now we want to insert a loop. So let's do that. So if we go over here to our toolbar and we go under this loop part. Now, if you remember from Hot Wheels cars, the giant loop-de-loop that you create out of the Hot Wheels track, well, it looks the same. So we're going to go under Instrument. We're going to go under Kits. And I would like the Aiden Chorus 32-beat. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so now we're going to insert that track. Now we have our track. We can get rid of that. And I want to see all the measures. Now, each of these is 4 beats. Okay. And we have a total track of 8 measures long. And each measure has 4 beats in it. Because remember, when we set our track up, when we set our project up, it is in 4/4 tempo at 100 beats per minute, as we can see up here. All right, so we've created that track. We've got that track. Wonderful. We want to make sure that we name this track. It says Aiden Chorus. I'm going to go ahead and rename that. So we're going to double click. Whoops, sorry. Nope, I want to right click. Rename track. Rename region. Now, these can be called regions or clips. I'm going to refer to them as regions in our PowerPoint presentation, but some people call them clips. Now we're going to rename this clip or region as simple drum beat. Wonderful. Okay. And now we want to set our levels to the microphone. Okay. So when we create a new track, we want to make sure we set our levels before recording. And on your audio interface itself, you can actually set the levels before doing this. Okay. You want to make sure that the click and count track are off. Now, I like to use the count track. The click track I don't like to use. It's very loud and can actually blow your speakers. But the count track is handy. And you can actually change the number of counts to come in. But I like having the count 1, 2, 3, 4 count in so that I know, okay, I've got 4 beats before I'm going to start recording and playing. All right, perfect. So before you move on here, we want to make sure that we save our file. So like I said, on my desktop, I have created a file folder called Logic Pro 10 Projects directly on my desktop so that I know exactly where things are going to be saved and how to access them quickly when I need to go into the project. So we're going to save this. Now, when you first create a project, it is highly recommended that you click Save, not Save As, because if you click Save As, it will not give you all these fancy options. So I'm going to call this, I saved it. I want to save it, not save as, I want to save it as a folder. Now you have a choice. If you save it as a package, and I'll show you, I will save it both as a package and a folder. Okay, but let's first save it as a package, and we're going to call this COVID-19 Jazz Tune. Okay, going to save it as a package, as a one-off document. I want to make sure that we go from my desktop. I'm going to find my Logic Pro 10 folder. Okay, I want to make sure that I have all the audio files in that package and the Alchemy audio data. Now the sampler audio data is important too, so let's click that as well. That'll give us our drum beat samples. I also like to have the Ultra Beats audio data saved as well. And if you're doing any movie work, you want to make sure you save the movie file too. But we're not doing any movie work or film work here. So we're just going to have those. And we're going to first save it as a package, and I'll show you what that looks like. So, COVID-19 Jazz Tune. So if we go into our folder, you can see it as one file, one Logic Pro 10 file. That when we open it, it's going to open everything at the same time in Logic. But I want to save it as a folder so that I have access to that non-destructive data. So that that audio file data that I can mix and master all the way I want without actually destroying the data itself. So let's save it as a folder. Okay. Now we're going to make sure that we're in the project side and we want all of those there. So we're going to save it in the folder. We're going to call it 1. And I'll show you what that looks like. So we're saving it as a folder. So now if we go back, we can see, okay, we've got our package save. Now we have our folder. And within that folder, we can see all of our audio files. Okay, we've created no audio files yet. We just have this sample drum beat that we've put in. But we haven't actually created any of our own unique original audio files yet. So let's do that now. So to create a new audio file, you're going to go up to this plus button. And it's going to ask you, what type of file do you want to create? Well, I want to create another audio file using my microphone. Okay, making sure that everything is at the right depth. So buffer size is 128. Our recording file type is AIFF, and we're at 24-bit recording type. Perfect. Create. Now this is going to be my microphone. So we want to rename this Grant Saxophone Sample 1. And I really liked, excuse me, I really like to change the icons. So we can go in here, we can find the tenor saxophone icon, boom, done. So let's have a listen to first the simple drum beat that we've used. Perfect. Now, as you can see, the beat is quite high, so I want to actually reduce that a little bit because you can see it's almost clipping. Okay, so now we've got sample saxophone 1. Now we haven't recorded anything, and because we haven't recorded anything, you're not going to actually see anything in here yet. Okay. Now it will also save it as a package, so there's no need to save it as package here. It'll save it as a package already before excuse me, we do that. Okay, so let's take a look, go back to our PowerPoint here. All right, so we're going to record now, which is awesome. Let's talk a little bit about multi-tracks. Now, your DAWs have the power to create multi-tracks, different number of tracks, different tracks for different instruments and different voices, as well as audio, digital MIDI voices as well. There are 3 different types of tracks. We've got audio tracks, we've got MIDI tracks, and we've got auxiliary tracks. The auxiliary tracks allow you to route different samples that you've already recorded together. Audio tracks are those that are coming in from instruments or from a microphone. And then you get MIDI tracks that are coming from within your DAW themselves. Okay, these are not recorded tracks from outside your computer or your DAW. These are primarily created internally in your DAW, but you can also create external MIDI tracks using external MIDI devices, such as external MIDI keyboard that we will be using later on. So we have 2 different types of multi-tracks. We get the instrument track, which includes your audio tracks from microphone and instruments, and we also get a global track that gives you your tempo meter, your markers if you create any, and your key changes. The first thing that I would like to show you is the ability to zoom in to your sound recording. Now, that being said, I would like to first record something. Okay, so let's do that first. Let's record a little bit of tunes to begin with, and we will start with that. Okay, so let's go back to our Logic recording here. Now I'm going to record the tenor saxophone, a little tenor sax COVID-19 jazz ditty that I've created, and we're going to record that directly over our simple drum beat. And so let's just warm up a little bit here. let's make sure that we are recording. Okay, and in order to do that, you can click this and it'll start to flash so you know that you're recording on that track only. And because I've put in the count timer here, the count in, it'll give me 4 beats before we actually get rolling. So let's hit the record button, get our 4 beats, and we'll record a little ditty over this sample drum beat. All right, so now we have our little sample drum beat. Yes, run chan chan. Very exciting stuff. All right, so now let's take a look back in our project folder that we've saved on our computer. Now, as you can see, this new file popped up. As soon as I hit record, it created a new track that is saved separately from the project. Now, if you save this directly as a package, you won't have this ability to have a straightforward AIFF audio track that you can then click and drag and take into other projects. If you save it as a folder, you have that ability. All right, so I'm going to create one more of these saxophone tracks. So just because I like some of the sound, but I don't want to toss all this track, and I really like some of that sound. So let's create a new one. Okay, we're going to call this again Grant Saxophone Sample. Whoopsies. Saxophone Sample 2. And again, we're going to change that. Okay, so I'm going to re-record this. I want to keep our drum beat, but I don't want this sound to play in my headphones as I record. So I'm going to hit the M, which will mute it as I play this new sample. So here we go. Let's play it again and see. And we'll take a look at the functions in 1 second. All right. There we go. So now that I've created and recorded those 2 samples, I want to now show you a couple of things in terms of getting being able to do a little bit of work within the samples themselves. Now, if we go back to our folder, you can now see there are 2 different recordings separated from each other that I can mix and match and move to other projects if need be. So it's really important to save it as a project folder rather than as a package. Now, to take a look at something, it's really important is that when you create a project package, the size of the file is actually smaller, quite a bit smaller, than the size of the file when you create a folder. So it's up to you and the amount of space that you have in your on your computer. But if you're working within a DAW that creates larger file sizes, okay, it's highly recommended that you actually purchase an external hard drive or a USB to save your work to, so that it doesn't slow down your computer. All right, let's go back to our presentation here. So zooming, what is zooming? Well, it's just like a magnifying glass. It allows you to zoom in and edit small pieces of your tune. So for example, if we go up here into our toolbar, it'll give us different options. if we go and find the zoom tool, and let's say we want to only take a look at this section here. So I click and drag, and it'll actually zoom in on that specific section, so that you can now very, very easily see the waveform here of the actual sound itself. And this is how you can edit it and zoom in and really slice and cut your tune very accurately. So now I'm just going to zoom out, and you can also do that up here, but I really do like the zoom tool itself. It just gives me a little bit more control in what I am able to do. Okay, and there's also key commands for zooming in, but that's for another day. And so anytime you use the toolbar up here, you want to make sure that you change it depending on what you're doing, and pay attention to what you're doing. Okay, so I always go back to the pointer tool so that I don't have to mess around there. All right, let's keep moving on. Oh, the really important thing is to always select and then zoom. So select what you want to zoom in on, okay, and then zoom in. But you can also click and drag to zoom in on a specific section that you really want to pay attention to. Okay. All right, so let's zoom back out. And then let's chat about trimming. All right, trimming, very, very a useful tool to be able to adjust the bounds of your region or your clip. Okay, because sometimes there's going to be some sounds that you don't want in your region or your clip, and some things, silence specifically, you don't want. So if we go back to our example here, now you'll notice that I actually changed the length of this one. So remember, it was kind of back here, right? We recorded a little bit too far. Now I want it to line up and end right on this part here. So we're gonna, now you can see that there's two different sections. So if your cursor is at the end of your clip and you have clicked on the top, the name of your region or your sample, you'll get this kind of loop. Now that'll allow you to then create a whole nother copy or loop of your sound, but we don't want to do that. We want to trim our sound. So we want to make sure that the cursor is hovered over the actual waveform itself, and you will click and you can drag right to the measure, okay, the beat. And that's what I want to do. I want to click and drag, and I want to line, well, that doesn't quite line up to what I've got, and that's right about there. Okay, there we go. Right on the beat and almost on the beat. There we go. Perfect. All right, so we've trimmed our clips. Now we can separate and cut our clips if we need to as well. This is non-destructive editing. Okay, doesn't affect the underlying audio data files. Okay, so if we go back to our folder here, these are the underlying audio data files, and it doesn't affect those. Okay, it's very important that when you cut and trim in here, it doesn't affect the audio data files here, so that if you do make a mistake, you can just plunk this right back in and start fresh. Okay, so we have a scissor tool or a cutting tool to be able to do this. Now we can do this a couple of different ways. We can take our playhead here and we can drag it and move it to wherever we want to cut the sample. And so I want to cut this part here. I want to separate out this part. Okay, and to make two different clips out of it, two different regions out of this one sample. So we can either move the playhead, okay, we can select our region, then we can either right click or we can go up to track and, sorry, not to track, we can go to, what is, no, we can go to edit, and we can go down to a split, which is also to cut, and it'll either say cut at the regions at the playhead, so this is the playhead, or at the locators. We haven't added any locators, but this is the playhead. So we can either click that, so split, and at the regions at the playhead, or making sure that we have selected the right sample, we can right click, head down to split, and split at playhead. So now that you can see we have two different regions, two different chunks of our track. Now you can also go here and you can go to the scissor tool under your left click tools. You can go to the scissor tool and you can cut and trim wherever you'd like. And I like this part because it allows me then to cut and trim at specific sections or a whole bar or measure if I want. So I want to clip from here. Okay, and then I also want to clip right at the bar head there. Boom. So now I've clipped that completely out and we get three different clips. Okay. And it's always important when you're using the scissor tool or the cutting tool to go back to your pointer tool just so you don't make any mistakes. But if you do make a mistake, it's very easy to edit and undo. You just go up to edit and undo the last thing that you've done. All right, so nudging. Now, a nudge, just as you can see here in the photo with the larger giraffe nudging the baby giraffe around, you can do the same thing here. Okay, if you simply want to move a section over, you can click that you want to nudge it. So you can actually right click, go to move, and then down you can either nudge it a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, and that is called nudging. And it quite literally is just a smidgen to the left or a smidgen to the right. Okay, but in order to move it freehand, there's a thing called the grid. Just like in graphing paper, you have different boxes, different squares. In Logic, or in most DAWs, you have a grid. And this grid is based on your tempo markings and the individual subdivisions within the tempo itself. As you can see here, we have this section called the snap. This is your grid. You can, now watch as I move this section. It is going to move not freely. So we can set it to bar, okay, so that it'll move every bar. It'll only snap to that bar head, okay. We can set it to every beat. So we have 4 beats per bar or per measure, and now it'll move to exactly the beat mark that you want it to move to. You can also set it to a subdivision, and so within each beat, you'll be actually able to move it in 16th note subdivisions of your quarter note beat. Okay, or if you have the newest version of Logic, which we do at the school, you can set it to Smart, which allows you, and it'll snap it to wherever you would like, either the bar, the subdivision, or the beat. But if you want to nudge it or move it very, very slightly or in a very small way, you can actually turn the grid off so that it will not snap to any part of the grid. So if we turn it off, now this can move freely wherever I want it. It's not going to snap to a beat, snap to a subdivision. I can move it within a 64th of a beat if I want to. But I like to have it on smart so that it can move to where I want to in the exact position that I wish it to be. And that is called the grid. And so by using the grid, that allows us to precisely place regions or clips wherever we would like. And so there are times when you're going to have the grid on, and there are times when you're going to have the grid off. So as always, folks, it's really important that if you wish to go a little bit more in depth with this, and you have a DAW at home on your home computer, okay, look at these slides and read through them a little bit more careful at your own pace. And so today we talked about the grid, we talked about nudging, so moving those regions or clips very slightly to the left or the right. We talked about cutting or separating clips or splitting clips. We've talked about trimming clips from the front or the back, depending on if you have silence in your recording, or you're recording and then you have to run to your computer and hit the space bar to stop the recording. You don't want that silence or the sound of you falling as you're running to your computer in your clip. So you can actually trim the end of your clip off. And the cool thing about trimming too is that if you split a clip, now you're able to trim different sections of your sound. And the first thing that we talked about was zooming, being able to zoom in to a specific region and to see, that's not quite lined up, right? That's not quite on the beat. So now we can actually move it, push it, nudge it, whoops, just a little bit so that it is on the beat. All right, that's everything for today, folks. I hope you had a wonderful, wonderful week ahead. And as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to fire me an email, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. As well, don't forget to answer the discussion question related to this video. That's all for today. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful, wonderful week ahead. Bye for now.